Alright, so the recording has started now. Okay, so for context, as like the title will say, there was really only one major comment in the Sparta reaction video after 400 something views. So yeah, we're gonna be looking at that one because Mangler took some issue with. I have not even read this. I saw the giant comment and I'm like, I'm good. That sounds like something not for Zim. And then I saw there's like 21 replies to it. So that's
There's also portions of it, like specifics of it, that I didn't see, and this is not really my raw reaction, but this is like I guess like my first time discussing it with anybody. So
yes.
I guess it's like kind of my first thoughts,
Yes,
sort of.
this is my raw reaction. I have not read this man's comment at all. I've heard some English say some things about it. I have not actually read it myself.
Indeed. You want to get started?
All right. So this is from Nugboy 5 days ago. About the point using the savior to scale Dante, you mistook something a bit. In minute also, if you could wait till I'm done reading the paragraph for responding, if you want to respond to the first paragraph, that'd be great.
Sure, I will.
In minute 40, you said the savior while Nero being used to power him up with the Sparta. It took Dante all his power to block his death ray, his strongest attack, which if anything just shows Dante is more or so scales to or equal to Nero plus Sparta powered being. Not just Sparta, as you pointed out later after Nero got freed, which what Dante was trying to do from the start, as stated by novel 2, that the Savior got slower and Dante was able to damage him a lot more to the point of a real impact destroyed the soul of his foot, and that should make base Dante greater than Sparta powered only Savior, even if it was taking Dante long to destroy him.
Okay, so aside from some of the grammatical errors with that sentence, that is a very very loaded paragraph. So let me first address this. So me saying that the savior, while Nero is being used to power him up with the Sparta, took all of Dante's power to block the death ray, which is the strongest stack. Which, if anything, shows Dante is more or less equal to Nero plus Sparta's powered being, not just the Sparta, as you pointed out later. No, this is incorrect because this is completely disingenuous of like the scans that I showed, which explains verbatim that when Dante uses the dreadnought form, he is not only using 100% of his demonic energy, which is all the power he has access to, he's unable to move because of the force of it. So the only reason that's keeping him alive is because of the properties of the armor. The actual AP and destructive, like the durability of the armor, or not durability, like the actual force of what the armor can withstand is below the death ray. So arguing that Nero is contributing it to he because he's part of the the core is doesn't really like negate my argument. My like the only point of explaining the savior doing this is to explain what the Sparta is capable of. The Sparta is responsible for all of the energy related attacks that the savior does. That's confirmed by Agnes in the descriptions and the information that I provided. It fuels all the energy for it. So yes, it would be more so responsible for the feats than Nero would. This is like saying that because Kyrie is a part of the core for the savior, that therefore she's more responsible for it than the actual energy source that's required to allow the savior to move its body,
Wait,
which is also confirmed in the scans that I provided.
wait. Okay. So just to be clear, to make sure I understand what I said, because my mom asked me a question. Uh, so, ¿cómo que nada? Anyways, so are you telling me that you're claiming that the Sparta is responsible for most of the energy attacks done by the Savior? Are we not going to include the like gems on his body, or would they already be broken by that point?
So parts of the gems are broken. Actually, no. Pretty much all the gems are broken because prior to this happening, Dante is shown breaking the gems with Yamato in the novel. So he's actually breaking the external energy source. So the Savior has external energy sources that are outside his normal power, amping him way more than he should. And Dante already broke all of those, and he's still much weaker. And the Death Ray is still stronger than what all of Dante's entire arsenal has to offer. And this is all coming from Dante, who is claiming this after he sees this, and information we see from Agnes, the guy that built the Savior and made predictions that it was going to contest Dante, and everything he predicted was correct. He was completely and totally correct. So you just to make this assertion that Nugget is making here, You just have to be completely ignorant of all the information that I provided and the novel. You just have to just completely gloss over the statements because like you have to give credit to Nero and Sparta. Like I also kind of have to ask like what the entire like. I guess I'll get to this later, but I'm curious like what his point to this is. Like what is he trying to prove exactly?
I think what he's trying to prove here is that if you're arguing that Nero plus Sparta's sword, since you claimed, I guess, that Sparta's sword amps the savior, if you're claiming, which that one's a little debatable, but you said Agnes mentioned it in the novel, so I'll just have to recheck that scan later. But no. So I guess what his claim is that both the power of the sword Sparta and Nero together weren't enough to kill Dante in base form with Dreadnought. And
Well,
then
Dante's dreadnought isn't base form. It's literally 100% of his demonic power.
and
It's
then
equivalent to Majin form.
and then like and then after, I guess what he's claiming is after Nero gets free, the sword Sparta would still be powering the savior, and Dante's able to break it down without Nero. So he's arguing that Dante, with just his base power, is strong enough to beat a being empowered by the
Oh,
sword Sparta.
yeah. So that's also wrong because Dante concedes later after he performs the real impact with Gilgamesh on the Savior's foot, and then does more damage to his body after the fact. He had been trying to destroy the Savior, but he did little more than chip off the outer layer. Nero being removed from the Savior just prevents it from being able to fly. It greatly weakens its outer shell and reduces a little bit of the power that it has. But as far as like its overall durability, most of its durability is completely intact. Um, I would also like to say that um, it's base Dante. That's fallacious for a couple reasons. So to assume that Dante is in base whenever he's using a gauntlet weapon is literally just incorrect with what a gauntlet weapon is intended to do. Gilgamesh is intended to take your flesh and amplify it by transforming it into steel. Anytime Dante uses a Gilgamesh attack, he's already above his standard base form. And like real impact is his strongest attack. So if all he did was punch the bottom of the foot and destroy the soul instead of, obliterating the entire savior, which is his intention because he's trying to destroy it, and you can only destroy the bottom of the foot, um, I'm sorry, but like you don't compare to that level of power. You're definitely not greater than a Sparta powered savior. Not at all. The point I was trying to make was that this is the weakest that the savior has to offer, and Dante still can't kill it, and he's trying to destroy it. There's no real way around that. He is actively confirming he is trying to obliterate the savior, and he's having very minimal progress.
All right,
So,
let us continue. That just means the savior is really durable, yes, but the savior wasn't being a problem with Dante as before when he had Nero inside him. Uh, I think you
um,
kind of already.
Death Ray. So this is kind of where we have to go over and identify what Dante considers a problem and what you consider a problem for Dante, because that's two different things. So Dante doesn't consider things to be problematic for him unless they are either A, extremely personal to him, or B, take a lot of time. Because how Dante manages the difficulty of his fights is based on time management. It's not based on the amount of damage he takes. A lot of people falsely assume that Dante considers things or fights to be pressurizing because they require a lot of force. But Dante doesn't remember enemies like Abigail, Chen, and like Argosax. Doesn't remember like many of these enemies that consistently contested him, or Alistair Trish, because none of them had any like super personal relationship to him in the fight as a whole. Even Trish, which he kind of like stole over her body after he shot her. But like, he only remembers fights like Mundus and Virgil specifically because like those are super personal related to him. Not just because they can contest him, but also because those fights get dragged out for a really long time. It doesn't matter how much power is in the fight. It's a matter of how long the fight goes on and how important it is to him personally. So, if Dante is spending the entire time running around the Savior, which is what he's doing in the novel and in the game, both of them are consistent with this interpretation. The novel just indicates the reason why Dante's running around is because he's unable to physically destroy the Savior. This is like if like he's just let's just say he's 10 times faster than the Savior, but can't kill the Savior. And we're saying he's not having trouble with the Savior. Yeah, he's not having trouble in the sense that the Savior is not really like that much of a threat to him, but he can't do anything to the Savior. It's like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Or an unstoppable force in this case that can't be touched by the immovable object, but the unstoppable force still can't hurt the immovable object. So it's a little bit disingenuous to say, like, he's not really having a problem. Well, if he's trying to free Nero, it definitely is a problem. The only reason he got Nero out of there was because he had Yamato, which can literally separate man from any demonic material.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, hang on. I think these next three are in tandem, so hang on. Also, assuming Dante used his DT on him after freeing Nero when it wasn't really said he would, and the only time it was specifically stated he used DT was just before this, when the Savior had Nero inside him, trying to be genuine here without assumption.
Go ahead.
Well, hang on. Do you have a quick response to that? Or?
No. I'll give my response. I just want to know. If you have any thoughts, like, feel free to give them. This is your video, too.
Well, it's because the thing here is for them. Oh, hang on. Okay, so unfortunately, my mom decided to wash the dishes right now in the background, so that's gonna be popping up.
Oh yeah.
It's fine. Anyways,
Dishwashing footage.
Well, I was gonna say, fucking here, let me try and move the mic a little farther away. Well, what I was gonna say was, so I don't remember you specifically saying in the video that Dante uses DT after Nero is freed, but then again, we recorded that video, I think, like 2 months ago, and then we edited it, like, last week.
So, what I said was something to the effect of, well, it's not confirmed specifically, you can argue that he did, because he specifically says, I used all manner of attacks, and nothing seemed to work. I just argued that would include DT, because DT is in his arsenal, and the first attack he led with on the Savior, the very first attack he led with was the strongest attack he had in his entire arsenal, amplified way above his base. But you're gonna sit here and tell me, we're just making assumptions that he'd be using DT. It's like, bro, what?
Alright, well,
This is like me taking a sledgehammer to a wall and beating it relentlessly, and it not having an effect, and then saying, well, I didn't attempt to use anything stronger after that.
I mean, if it's
what was
all
the point of the
attack,
sledgehammer?
Then that should be fair game to argue, because I think there are some attacks that are only in DT, right?
Yes. But it's also just like, there are attacks that in DT amplify, like his DT amplifies his current attacks way beyond his base. The point is that if you lead with the strongest attack in your arsenal already amplified above your base, why wouldn't DT be fair game? Because DT would be the only thing that could match a Gilgamesh Real Impact.
Alright.
And the Gilgamesh Real Impact only destroyed the bottom of the foot.
So hang on. Okay, so I understand what you're saying, that, like, okay, so you can make the assumption, that seems fair. But I don't want to talk about too much, because I think the other comments are in reference to that. So let me see what the rest says. So, to be really genuine, the Savior at his peak with Nero plus the Sparta with the strongest attack is equal to 100% Dante with DT, not the Savior after when Nero was free. Second, okay, hang on.
Yeah. So to be genuine, no, the Savior with his strongest attack is above Dante with 100%. It is confirmed that the force of it prevents him from moving forward, so only the immortality and the invulnerability of the Dreadnought is keeping him from dying. He literally states verbatim, hang on, let me get the actual scan.
Well, keep in mind,
he says if he tried to avoid it, he probably would have been reduced to ashes. So, no.
Alright. Seems pretty reasonable. Second, I want to touch on the argument that Dante became stronger than Urizen pre-Fruit only because he absorbed the Sparta, but you're leaving out more stuff in context, as shown in the Nico files, and I'm quoting. Awaken Dante. I knew the one and only Dante wouldn't stay down for the count, but to absorb Rebellion and Sparta into himself to unlock a whole new level of power, I can't do Nico's little sound effects. These legendary types sure to know how to stage a comeback. Sin Devil Trigger Dante. Dante's true form, with the two swords absorbed into him, his true power has awakened. The implications here is not only because Dante absorbed the Sparta, but also Rebellion too, and fused with them is the reason he got stronger than Urizen. So would you like to respond to that?
So there's a couple things that have to be addressed here. So stating that he absorbed the Rebellion and the Sparta into himself to unlock a whole new level of power. Yeah, he's unlocking the Sin Devil trigger. That's not in reference to his base form. As for the Dante's true form with his two swords absorbed into him, his true power is awakened. Yes, the Sin Devil trigger has awakened. Like you realize in the panels that I provided when I provide evidence, which you didn't contest, you just say that I left out evidence, but that's like this information doesn't talk about base Dante at all. In the awakened Dante, what's confirmed in his description is that he got that the blood grew at his hair, that the blood actually make him stronger. But like V says verbatim, Dante is on his way to where Urizen is. However, I don't think he's going to win. So he says Dante, with a blood boost and the standard Sparta sword, is not going to beat Urizen 2. So I don't know what you think the Rebellion sword is going to contribute to that, because the Rebellion is just the physical manifestation of Dante's power. It's just Dante's current demonic power in a physical form. What could absorbing that into his body actually do for him? Because keep in mind, the Sin Devil triggers are acquired through the 100% combination of your humanity and your demonic power. The reason he's able to unlock the Sin Devil trigger is because Rebellion's ability is the ability to merge man and demon together. The reason Virgil's able to get his is because he literally fuses both the demon and human sides of himself back into the same being. It has nothing to do with just the inherent sword like Yamato or Rebellion. I mean, yes, the ability obviously allows for the circumstance to happen, yes, but the weapon itself is not contributing to a direct raw power increase. The Rebellion is already at its max power. I mean, you could argue it could get progressively stronger the stronger Dante gets. That's fine. But absorbing it into himself wouldn't make it more powerful, whereas the Sparta is not his power. This also doesn't address the information that I presented where I provided not only the evidence and the stuff within the narrative and the lore. There's a direct statement that the Sparta sword is just stronger than Rebellion. It just is a sword packing more power than Rebellion. So, what would be your counter argument to that? To a direct, blatant statement?
Actually, if I recall correctly, I think we did include that scan in the video, right?
We did. We included all the scans in the video.
Alright, so...
These scans were not included because they don't have anything to do with base Dante's power. They have to do with how he unlocked Sin Devil Trigger. But the video wasn't about Sin Devil Trigger Dante. It wasn't about Dante at all. It was about Sparta. The entire point of this is to explain how strong Sparta is.
I was under the impression it was about the Savior.
Yeah, I know, a lot of people thought that, and it's I'm sorry, but I'm not the one who decided to write a series in such a way where the character who everyone compares to is off screen for 100% of his feats. Because he's already dead during the main timeline, and everyone is talking about him in secondhand knowledge. I'd also like to point out, before we get further in the video, just something to mention, that using Dante as a comparison point in comparison to Sparta is not really a fair example to be using when we're talking about a Sparta power scaling video. Because Sparta is not only reference point, all of Dante's feats are performable specifically because he's a descendant of Sparta, not the other way around. Sparta is the one that's being compared to. Sparta is the one that's being talked about, not Dante. I mean, granted, Dante's still very important. His feats are talked about in the series. I'm just saying, whenever Dante's talked about, his feats are always in reference to things Sparta did. So, just want to point that out.
You move on. You feeling a little better there?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little better.
All right. The implication here is not only Dante was about Rebellion too. Rebellion is just Dante's full power, or his just the physical manifestation of his power, like Mangler said. We'd have no reason to, unless you believe it serves as a double Dante, so you're adding Dante again to Dante on top of the Sword Sparta.
But then you kind of miss the entire purpose of what manifestation means. It's just a physical representation of his power in reality. He's not doubling his power. He's manifesting it as a weapon.
Alright, so the game files serve as a way for the devs giving us more detailed info on the characters in game, which is more reliable than just one-off lines thrown by characters like Griffin in the heat of the moment.
No. Griffin is explaining to us what's happening with the Sparta. Is that, like...
I'm not too sure what the point of that comment is, though, because...
The point of me explaining that in the case of Rebellion's activation, like, it's activated was wrong. Because if he just absorbed Rebellion into his body and he repaired it, it would just come out looking like Rebellion. Well, Devil Arm called Devil Sword Dante.
I'm just, like, a little confused there, because if I recall correctly... you used Griffin as an example of people saying things but not technically being accurate based off like what we actually find out, right?
I don't think I used Griffin. No. I don't think I used Griffin. I used someone else. No. So what I used what was his name? The example that I used was in explaining the Sparta, or not the Sparta statements, the DMC4 statements involving some people believing that Dante has surpassed his father. I was explaining that a lot of those statements, specifically all from DMC4, are made under the assumption that other individuals know how powerful Sparta is. But, like, you have to question the legitimacy of those statements when, one, they're secondhand knowledge. No one's really fought like full power Sparta outside of Mundus, and he got clapped by him. And then the second one is that all of those statements, even if they were true, get retconned with every single new entry and all new source material, because every single source material provides more feats for Sparta doing things that scale above the main cast, as I've already shown and demonstrated.
All right.
Like, even the Send Devil Trigger, like, form specifically is a statement from Nico that he might have more power than Sparta. Okay, so if Sparta's not a reference point or a goalpost, why is he being goalposted in the description for the strongest form of Dante at the strongest point of the timeline? Why is he even being mentioned?
All right, let me continue reading this here. So basically, Sin DT Dante, which is Sparta plus Rebellion absorbed and fused to form Devil Sword Dante in order to reach a new level, is greater than Urizen. So, as we know, the Rebellion's ability is the opposite of Yamato, which separate demonic power from flesh, is to combine power. No. Okay.
Well, no, it's supposed to combine demonic material with human material. Whether or not that receives another power, more power, is entirely dependent on the person. Because most people would usually just lose their mind.
So again, it's not only Sparta plus Dante fused, but Sparta plus Rebellion, with which is special abilities to absorb and fuse power greater than Urizen. Okay, so again, it fuses humanity, or human and demonic, but specifically on this one. So, to be fair, this line of reasoning, since I know Mangler's already given his thoughts on this, I'll be technically honest here. This really just depends on how you interpret Rebellion's existence. If you believe Rebellion counts as a second Dante, then this line of reasoning makes sense. If you believe Rebellion is just Dante directly and doesn't count as like a separate version of him, then, well, you take Mangler's interpretation. But I think we need a dev statement at this point. Cause
so I've kind of... Like, I have enough statements for this already, but, like, how the Spartas use their humanity when they're not using them outside of special attacks is by combining themselves with their swords. That's literally how Dante achieves the Sin Devil Trigger, is that he stabs himself to activate the condition.
Yes.
Well, he can technically transform into it, but, like, that's the main way he does it for the first time. And that's also how Virgil does it as well.
Well, so the reason I'm kind of pointing this out is because technically... This is just going to depend on how you interpret Rebellion, because...
I don't think so, because you can't misinterpret the meaning of manifestation.
We know Rebellion's a sword that exists separate from Dante. It's always...
Yes, but it's just a manifestation of his power. That's all it is.
But the problem is that the sword can be broken even when Dante's not broken, which, if it's a manifestation of his power, the sword should have repaired itself in the month Dante was fucking out, since his power was still there.
I mean, it didn't break his power. His power was still intact.
The point I'm trying to make
like,
is that if we assume Rebellion is just solely Dante's power, it doesn't really make sense Rebellion didn't repair itself, since Dante was not only getting stronger, but if it's a physical... Again, it's a separate object. Whether or not you believe it counts as a second Dante to give power to is just going to depend on your interpretation of how you want to take manifestation.
I would just assume that Dante didn't repair it because, like, not only was he unconscious for that period of time, he got the Sparta sword immediately afterwards.
Well, the sword should have repaired itself, logically. If it's just Dante's, like, raw power physically, like, manifest, if Dante gets stronger...
It was broken by Urizen, so I would argue against that.
So would you just... Are you now going to argue that Urizen just wanted the sword broken so badly? He's like, no, now you don't get to fix yourself.
Well, when he attacked, any of the attacks he landed on Dante prior to that moment were intended to break them. Like, he only specifically attacks Dante with the intent to just, like, take him out at the end of the fight.
I'm just pointing out that this one is more going to be up towards how you want to interpret Rebellion's existence versus actually...
Why do you give that kind of leeway when there is no evidence that indicates it's, like... Dante multiplied by Dante.
Because there is leeway there. The Rebellion sword existed before Dante, so it could have its own level of power we don't know about, because Sparta split his power into fucking thirds, and we know Rebellion's probably sword number fucking 3.
Yes, but we already do know that.
Well, no, because it's not... I don't think it's... What's the exact statement? It's like one sword was named after the will... Was it the will to rebel?
One was named to bore his own name, the other was to embody a god of death, and the other was to embody retaliation.
Okay, yeah, so
they're intended...
Now watch DMC6 confirm it's not Rebellion in your model.
No, DMC6 will be like, there's a fourth sword.
The perfect amulet actually turns into a fucking sword.
It turns into a scythe.
It turns into 2 swords.
So, my point is that, like, they're already made specifically for Dante and Virgil's power. They can unlock greater amounts of power, but they themselves not be a raw additive or multiplicative increase.
I'm just saying that technically this one is going to be up a little more to how you subjectively believe Rebellion's existence, because we don't have a direct statement saying that Rebellion and Dante are one the same.
We don't, because we can just use Occam's razor to just go by what mechanics are used with the Sparta sword, with the Rebellion. That its intention is to manipulate and at least combine demonic and human material to reach a new power. Power is in Devil Trigger.
I understand that, but again, like, so you can already just argue Rebellion without Dante's power has its own set of power that's unquantifiable, because it had Sparta's power inside of it. At least some portion of it. So you can legitimately just argue Rebellion does add something to the Cindy. We don't know how much, but it could have added something.
It wouldn't be anything meaningful anyway. That's kind of why I'm wondering, like, what's the point of this argument? The purposes of Rebellion isn't to give him more increased power; it's to give him a new form.
I understand that, but the point I'm trying to make is that since he does absorb Rebellion into himself, if you interpret Rebellion to be like Dante 2, and then so it's Dante 1 plus 2 plus Sparta 1, then, like, okay, you can make, like, that... The interpretation, whether or not you believe it has a lot of standing to it, is technically not one we can just wave off completely.
The interpretation wouldn't matter if it was true, because the Sparta has better feats anyway.
Yeah, like, the Sparta's doing the heavy lifting, but, like, technically you can say Rebellion did something. We just would assume that the majority of the improvement is from Sparta. England?
Level above Urizen, when he says, so basically Cindy T. Dante is just Sparta.
Mangler? Mangler, leave and rejoin the call, damn it. Mangler, no! Okay, hang on. Okay, Mangler, speak. Okay, Mangler, leave the call and rejoin. Yeah, it's you.
Hello?
Okay, you back? Are you back with us, Mangler?
Are you able to hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. Can you speak?
Okay, so For some reason. For some reason, that was being really silly.
Look, I'm just saying, while I do agree that the Sparta does most, if not all, of the heavy lifting in Sin DT, technically you can argue Rebellion added something. Like, that argument does technically exist, and we can't just, like, wave it off completely. Especially, so even if you believe it doesn't give Dante's power, like, a double increase...
That's my point.
I'm sorry, what was that? Mangler?
I'm saying the argument is, like, weak. And it's...
Wow. Alright, I have to as well cover the last portion of this, and then we'll go through the responses, or some of the responses there, because there were quite a few there.
I hate my computer more than any being on this fucking planet. It's worthless.
I don't know. Kyle might be able to fight you on that one.
Well, so the point I was saying is that it being a contributor isn't really a factor, because that's not its intended purpose. That's not the reason he even fused with it in the first place. And Sparta already outscales the examples here. So you basically be arguing for an unquantifiable increase when it's already established that Rebellion was powerful with Dante, with the Sparta sword and the blood boost, still can't beat Eurozone. So,
well, to be fair, regarding the Sparta sword and DMC5, it's technically not even trying, technically, because it only really works on Mundus.
That's also what makes this worse. It's not able to use its devil trigger, and it's stronger than the strongest version of Rebellion. Which the Rebellion at this point should be way more powerful than the Rebellion from the prologue, and the Sparta sword is still greater than it without its intended devil trigger.
Yeah, so, I mean, ultimately, if Rebellion's contributing something, it's contributing minimal. It's unquantifiable how much you think Rebellion would be throwing in regardless.
Okay, so then he says, thirdly, I want to touch on the Nelo Angelo scaling. Nelo Angelo does fight a prime Void Mundus to give time to escape, but that still holds up with previous statements from the novel before the nightmare that goes as follows. Mundus called his, page 31, 231, Mundus called his creation Nelo Angelo. Although the new Black Knight was incredibly strong, he particularly did not give in control, represented a danger to the Lord. Here it is stated that the main timeline Nelo Angelo was considered a danger to basically revive Mundus at this point. It's not like the case forward with Nightmare was stated to a danger because it would have destroyed the demon world in accident if Mundus didn't take its will, as stated in Visions of V, but Nelo Angelo was considered a direct threat to Mundus, where he's basically fully revived because as soon as he was done, he went on to create Schussler Dante. So this is disingenuous for several reasons. So, for starters, in that example, in that page, it's clarified on the previous page that Mundus is not fully revived. When he made Nelo Angelo, that was after the events of DMC3, which is 9 years before the events of DMC1. Mundus in DMC1 isn't even fully revived. Mundus never gets fully revived. Before the Nightmare drops that information that he doesn't come back at full power, it's still confirmed during the events of DMC3, he's not at full strength yet. So, until we get a statement in the canon as of now that Mundus is fully revived, not that he tries to revive, not that he tries to come back, but that he is fully and completely revived or at full power, then you cannot make that assertion. And keep in mind, this Nelo would be way weaker than the one during DMC1. And Mundus, in his statue form, is able to almost kill Dante at the very end of the game in the demon world. With the Sparta sword, by the way. Who would be stronger than the strongest version of Nelo Angelo in DMC1. Way stronger than the Nelo Angelo you're talking about, which takes place shortly after the events of DMC3. So, no, it is incorrect to say that main timeline Nelo Angelo contested a full power Mundus. Which, keep in mind, full power Mundus isn't even equivalent to Void Mundus. Void Mundus is stronger than Mundus from the 2,000-year time skip. So that wouldn't even be true if he was fully revived.
Lies and deceptions. Hang on.
I was going to say, like, he literally fights a stronger Dante, and Dante confirms he's more powerful than the Mundus from him.
Okay, so his next comment here seems to be in reference to his position versus Nightmare. Then Angelo was Dante's toughest fight before Mundus, which should easily put him above, even above Nightmare, and it would make sense since Mundus used Nightmare and Trish to trap Dante and kill him after Nelo failed, which shows that Nelo counted on by Mundus to be able to kill Dante.
Hang on a sec, let me read this because
No, so basically, I guess he's trying to say Nelo Angelo scales above Nightmare, which would mean that he would contest Mundus because Mundus was afraid Nightmare was going to destroy the demon world. I'm assuming that's what he's going with.
Did he not see the end of the game where Statue Mundus is able to almost one-shot Dante? Like, do you not realize that Mundus during the events of the games is literally amping the generals to fight Dante? That's confirmed by Griffin. Like, the only reason they're able to battle Dante or contest him in any capacity is because he's amping the generals.
To be fair, I argue Nelo Angelo's not being amped because like his form comes after fucking removing.
Nelo Angelo's fine because Nelo Angelo's breaking free. The point I'm making is that the only reason the generals are able to fight Dante at all is because the restricted Mundus is giving them their power. And the only reason Dante's going to die at all is because a restricted Mundus decides to one-shot him. So arguing that Nelo Angelo was Dante's toughest fight doesn't mean anything because Mundus was going to one-shot a stronger Dante in the demon world. And keep in mind, Dante says he barely defeated Nelo Angelo in 3-1-4-2. It wasn't just that it was his toughest fight. He barely defeated him. So this does not actually support your arguments at all.
All right. So, yeah, even if you believe Nelo Angelo's stronger than Nightmare, which with that statement I think that's fair to say, Mundus demonstrates in his one like intro cutscene, he's way stronger than all of them.
That's also not the Mundus you fight that fights the Sparta sword, and that's not Mundus during the 2,000-year time skip, and that's not Mundus from the alternate timeline. That is like 3 levels of Munduses below where he's supposed to be, but supposedly where you're supposed to argue.
Okay.
Like, DMC has a linear power scale. The further you go into the timelines, the stronger the antagonists of the games get.
Unfortunately. My boy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So if anything, it's more consistent that the alternate timeline Nelo Angelo would still go up against Mundus enough to buy enough time as he's still below Mundus, but not that far off. This means Void Mundus shouldn't be that far off from main timeline Mundus. It holds some consistency. And Dante was stated by the guy to DMC1 to maybe surpass Sparta after beating Mundus. Would have been able to beat Void Mundus considering he went into fighting with the mentality he's at least equal to the Mundus he fought since he didn't state otherwise during the fight. So...
okay, try not to retread on ground we've already covered because we already just got done talking a lot about this.
Okay. No, it would not be consistent that he Void Mundus should not be far off from the main time limiters. That's incorrect. Dante literally fights an enemy. So I've already said that Mundus during the events of DMC1 isn't fully revived. Abigail is directly stated to be on par with that of the Demon King. So he's as powerful as Mundus was during the 2,000-year time skip at the heat of his power. And Dante is directly able to clash with him at full strength, and they're completely, perfectly equal with one another. And he needs to DT to break the stalemate. Dante would get way stronger after this because the Spartans not only have like passive growth, they also get stronger after every fight, more human blood, yada, yada, yada. And then he also goes on to fight Alistair Trish and like the Beast Heads, and then he fights Void Mundus, and he says, yeah, he's stronger, he's probably stronger than the same Mundus that I fought, but I'm not the same man that I used to be. So this Void Mundus is a Mundus in an alternate timeline where he was never sealed away. So bare minimum, he would be equivalent to the power of the Prime Mundus, but he's also fighting a stronger Dante, and in this reality, he has complete control of everything within the timeline, including the demon world. So to argue that Prime Mundus would have the same level of power when his feats are arguably weaker and less impressive is not a feasible argument. So Void Mundus would be way stronger than the main timeline. That's not a level of consistency.
Yeah, right.
Dante being stated by the guy to DMC1 to maybe surpass Sparta. Dante stated in DMC4's History of DMC that with swords in hand and his guns available, that some believe he has surpassed his father in power. That statement's wrong. Like, you can have statements that are just objectively wrong. He literally almost dies to a statue version of a non-fully revived Mundus. And the only reason he's able to contest that non-fully revived Mundus at full strength is because he has Sparta's sword. So no, he didn't surpass Sparta. He's literally using Sparta's power to be able to even walk into the room at Mundus and not get blinked out of existence.
You could also argue that surpassing Sparta in this context would just mean actually doing what Sparta fucking couldn't, which is putting an end to Mundus.
Yeah. I would argue narratively, the entire point of surpassing Sparta is to surpass his deeds. To do what he shouldn't, which is that, I mean, especially if you go by the novel, what's mentioned in the novel is literally clarified right when Dante cuts down the Hellgate in Deadly Fortune, that Dante doesn't understand why his father didn't cut down these areas, why he didn't destroy artifacts and things, Hellgates like this. And Trish says she understands why, because she's a demon. It's because the Hellgates and things like this remind Sparta of home. They are his home. He doesn't kill these demons and kill things related to the demon world unless it's absolutely, completely necessary. But even then, he seems to make exceptions, like for Mundus. He doesn't kill them because they're his, like, brethren. They're literally his species. And they're from his home. Like, they are some of his greatest comrades. So arguing that, like, you surpass him in power or skill or strength, when it's like the statements of him surpassing his father are mainly just him being a better man than his father. If you want to argue power, I already addressed that in the video. Dante does not surpass Sparta during the events of, like, the main games. The only time you could argue he surpasses him in power is maybe to the very, very end of Deep 5.
All right. So let's finish up the comment, and then we gotta go talk about the responses. So finally, to this, when Dante fought and beat Mundus in Sparta DT, Mundus did not mention he is weaker than Sparta, confirming that Sparta fought Mundus with the same amount of power. His peak. That's
not how that works. So, Mundus does not have to make a statement that he's weaker than Sparta. That's like a claim of blatancy. Like, what is obvious for thee is not obvious for me. So, because Mundus didn't specifically state you're weaker than Sparta, therefore Sparta fought me with the same amount of power. This also assumes that Mundus was at the same level of power in DMC1, which is not true.
Even then,
but
DMC5, since he brought it up, would directly retcon that as being Sparta's full power, since Sparta split his power into 3 different swords.
DMC3 retcons that, because it establishes after he senses his power is too strong, he seals away all of his abilities. Like, every game retcons Sparta's power to some degree, or adds, like, more lore that puts more problems in scaling the Sparta chain. Probably scaling people to Sparta because it keeps buffing Sparta.
I will say that, just to give some, like, understanding here, I think when we do the reference video, I've already told Devil this and Kyle this. I think I told you this and you probably disagree, but, like, we're gonna have to sit down and have a long conversation about what we, like, how we scale the Sparta sword's past, like, feats to, like, its present retcon's fucking power. At some point, we're at.
I mean, we can do, like, different states. Like, we could be like, here's the Sparta sword during the year 2001 and what it's scaled to.
I was gonna say we're not gonna do that now, but we will have to discuss it some because we'll have to talk about Sparta sword at some point. Anyways.
Oh yeah, no.
And later on in DMC4, Dante's content with the Sparta amp being that as the savior and pulling on it with damaging it, even though so Mangler already covered he wasn't really damaging it until Nero leaves it, and even then he's not doing as much damage as he thought he was.
Minor damage with his best abilities.
Savior
with the intent to kill.
Okay, even as reservable in base no less, and the Savior only was above his 100% with DT while having Nero inside to amp him more than, and that still shows that Nero himself is really impressive and strong, but without him and with those Sparta, only Dante be on the same if not higher level. Okay, so I'm going to point this out as well, because Mangler I don't think mentioned this in the video, and he didn't mention this during his little, like, rant. Sanctius kind of confirms the Sword Sparta isn't helping him. At the end of the fight, he confirms the Sword Sparta is not giving him strength, which would mean that even if you assume he's gaining some power from it, he's not gaining anywhere near what it could fully offer him.
Well, that's also because the Sparta, as Nero clarifies, requires you to have, like, a heart. Like, you have to have some humanity. Otherwise, the Sparta won't give you out its power. Not that it would activate the Devil Trigger for you anyway, because it's pre-programmed to fight Mundus. Which is why Dante has to absorb it directly to get its power.
He basically has to override the Sparta's will in order to get the full strength from the sword. Now, granted, Sanctius is gaining some portion of the power. I think him saying, like, why won't you give me strength is a little fallacious. But it's clear it's not giving him all of it. And that's also confirmed by Urizen saying the Sword Sparta serves no purpose. And that's in reference to Mundus, being fucking gone.
Well, his description in 3142's art book confirms that the power of the sword resonates with him, amplifying him. So it is giving him strength. It's just not giving him the strength that he needs to win the battle with Nero. He's like, why aren't you giving me power? It's not that Sparta isn't giving him power. It's that it isn't giving him enough power.
We could always go with like the crackpot assertion that kind of works like Soul Eater. I don't know how familiar with the Soul Eater, but it's like the Meisters have the power and the weapons are amplifying it. So you could argue it's like a Meister and his weapon relationship.
I don't know enough about Soul Eater. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So that's more or less that situation there. Again, so for sure, regardless, Sanctius is not getting the full power of Sparta. It's never confirmed he gets the full power. The Sword Sparta is a picky bitch, so that should be for sure a given. That's not the full power. Okay, Dante Sparta doesn't change anything. Still admit that Dante one-shots everyone besides Virgil and Sparta has been debunked. What a shame. Okay, so this is a stupid myth to begin with, since actually if you watch every single... The only time you believe this actually existed was just to Argosax. In the Abigail fight, Abigail's able to clash with him and also technically beats him in their first encounter. Mundus has a whole fight with him. Arkham technically fights him all the way through. And the Savior...
Beowulf even scraps with him.
Yeah, this only existed because some people thought Dante literally showed up to fight Argosax and kills him just in one shot by the end. But then 3142 came along and was like, yeah, there's actually a fight here.
And it confirms Argosax is drained. But I mean, so the only reason you would believe this is if you played all the games and you only remembered the parts of it that showed Dante like winning. Like that's really like these arguments of Dante one-shotting or clobbering everyone in the verse kind of operates under the assumption that it's
doesn't even Burial like survive blows from Dante? Like, doesn't he just get flung back in the cutscene and then he's like, I have my pride, so I'm gonna like go for this ultimate attack?
He says your attacks surpass my abilities. How shameful! Burial does, but like you could argue it's fair for Burial not to scale them. I'm just saying, like, if we go by every single game, we're not even including the novels. If we go by the games, he gets contested by Beowulf. He literally is breathing hard after the fight, gets slammed into the ground. Later on, he confirms that Beowulf is an insanely strong demon, as he copies a weapon made from Pandora, specifically to emulate his power. In 5, he says he's a stubborn bastard, tougher than most, though. And he's actually frustrated about the fact that he didn't have the Beowulf gauntlets. Which was also going to be like a weird scaling issue we're going to talk about later on at some point as well. But Beowulf
is weird because technically you could argue he fought Sparta, but what version of Sparta he fought would be weird. Well, we'll talk about Beowulf at some point.
We would just say that, like, again, the issue is that Sparta is just not attempting to kill. I'm just saying, generally speaking, we have a guy that contests him, pretty easily able to like slap him the fuck around, leaves because he gets blinded. Virgil fights him 3 times. Arkham fights him and says his attacks are no use, that you can't defeat a pure demon, one who's using the real power of Sparta. Go by DMC1, he gets contested by Nelo Angelo 3 times. I think there's additional material in the memory of, the Memorial album that confirms that Nightmare is like a challenge. But even without that, all of the generals fight him 3 times.
I'll say it's okay. You don't have to list off every single encounter specifically. I think the point gets across just fine. Just mentioning the final bosses technically have a lot more context around them.
It's more than the final boss. It's like, oh my god, this man gets contested like a dozen times.
I know. I'm just saying we don't have to list every single boss that's technically contested. Anyways, we're just to be clear, we're already at 48 minutes. This is going. This response video is going to be longer than the actual video.
Good. I'll be sure to wrap it up here.
Not news. We already knew that a long time ago. He doesn't want to Argosax. Yeah, all right. We already talked about. How does not change anything when I pointed out some left out context that the Sparta isn't that much higher than Dante and that Dante is based on the Savior scaling used, which again, if anything, shows Dante's greater than Savior powered Sparta. Okay, we already covered
Wrong.
But 100% DT Dante equals Savior with Sparta plus Nero again. So that's that we already covered that one, but just remember that Mangler already showed the scan where Dante would turn to ash if he didn't use Dreadnought. So I wasn't saying Dante one-shotted it, nor anyone. That's a lie. Not even Void Mundus for Chen. So he didn't say it, but there was a popular consensus that, like, especially Argosax was the unfortunate victim of that one, where people thought Argosax didn't scale Dante at all because his final death occurs by being shot once.
But shot by a charge shot after stabbed by a stinger, which are the strongest base attacks he has outside of like real impact. A little disingenuous, one might say.
I was pointing out some left out context and showing that yes, Dante is greater than Sparta. I didn't say it was one-shotting him. All right, Dante Sparta. The general consensus in that fight from average DMC players that Dante one-shots the Savior while Nero destroys it, but people see Dante taking a punch from Savior using a base form, which is inaccurate since the Savior was already shut off at that point. He was not shut off during the punch. He was shut off like right after. With or without Nero, and he doesn't, people generally believe DMC4 Nero to be far, DMC4 Dante. Heck, the average fan DMC completely even forgot Nero amped up the Savior. Also, there's still the point made in the video that Sparta is at the certain item in Dante's power spike in DMC5. Again, all you've done is just prove the point. He doesn't one-shot Demon Kings, period. That wasn't the guy's point.
So that's, well, that is true. That was not my point. My point in the video was not to explain that. That may have been like a sub point just to throw out there as like a token of knowledge, but it wasn't something that I was trying to explain, like, guys, the point of this video is to explain that Dante doesn't one-shot everybody. It's just as a result of the evidence, I end up explaining Dante doesn't one-shot everyone. That's not the intention. It's just a byproduct.
Also, just to be clear, in case that's a little, in case people are a little clear, that's only when Dante fought them at the time when he fought them. That's not, like, DMC5 Dante could show up and one-shot Mundus. You could argue Anime Dante could show up with full DT power and probably, like... severely
we're not saying DMC5 Dante resurrects all of his past enemies, runs through a gauntlet, and they'll be able to contest them. We're saying when he fights them at the point in the story when he actually fights them, he does not one-shot literally everybody.
Yes.
But that wasn't the point I was making. I was explaining these feats to explain how the Sparta also scales at least to Dante, easily above him, consistently, and that the Sparta is the reference point, not Dante.
Okay. And keep in mind, the Sparta sword is only 1/3 Sparta's power, so it's 1/3 Sparta Savior plus Nero. Okay, so we did mention the sword gets split up into thirds. We don't actually know the ratios. If I'm being honest, the ratio is probably something more akin to like 70, 15, 15.
95, 99% Sparta. Because
no, I don't think so. Because Yamato on its own is already insanely powerful. I think Yamato...
Well, so...
It's probably like 70, 20, 10.
So the reason... No. So... First of all, it being split into 3 parts doesn't mean that like any of these are split into any significant powers. As far as significant percentages, as far as the Sparta sword, you have to consider the Sparta sword hasn't increased in power since it's been like sealed. It hasn't increased at all. Whereas Yamato and Rebellion have gotten stronger since the beginning because they're the manifestations.
Yamato on its own is actually a weapon of like great power when it's not connected to Virgil. Virgil amping it does not like change that.
I understand. I'm talking about the fact that their wielders got stronger over time, so the swords grew with them. Regardless.
This is hypothetical. We don't know the percentages. I'm just saying that more likely it's like a fucking 70 fucking 20-10 split. It could be more likely
the Sparta is the greatest majority of the power. That's
yes, that would be the fair assumption to make. It would not be like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split. That for sure would be a little too.
And you have to explain that the other swords are getting way stronger over the course of the games. You could say that in certain contexts they like scaled with the Sparta, sure, but the Sparta doesn't get stronger from the point that it's sealed. The other swords do. That's blatant evidence the Sparta is a more powerful weapon than them.
Alright, let's move on from there. The point isn't that Dante is greater than Sparta. He is by DMC 4 and 5 standards. The point is that the Sparta sword and other...
That's...
So that guy just missed the entire point of your video.
Like I kind of have to ask. Like the entire point of the video was to explain. Okay, let me make this really easy. The power of Sparta, a DMC reference video. Okay. So I think I got it, but it's not about Dante, obviously.
The point is, okay. So I'm just gonna I don't understand what Dante Sparta is saying there. Like, the whole point of the video was to literally explain that Sparta's still greater than Dante, at least throughout the events of 4. Saying that Dante's greater than Sparta by DMC 4 and 5 standards if those are reference again, like this is just confusing because this means he probably didn't listen to the video in full context. Which
he probably was just like, okay, overwhelming evidence in 2's novel. I'll concede that, but maybe he beats him in 4 and 5. This is not a negotiation.
The point is that the Sparta sword and other factors played a huge role in his power-up scenarios. It's not mostly his potential. You know, I bet they fucking got this fucking misconception because he spent fucking 30 minutes on the fucking Savior.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I did address that the point of the Savior's like scaling was just to address Sparta. I realized when I made that script that was going to be difficult for people to understand, but the entire point of the video is to explain how strong Sparta is. Sorry.
Oh.
Go on. All right, let's go to the next one.
Yes. So, yeah, hang on. Well, we've got to finish it technically. Sparta's sword and the air factors played a huge role in his power-up scenario. It's not mostly his potential. That's fair for DMC5. People didn't think Dante was a god, but close to one because of how easily he would one-shot people of the same tier. Well, okay, so just to be clear here, Dante in his tier... If we're assuming the tier is tier 2, because I remember Dante Sparta completely disagrees with the 9D statement, which is I'm not gonna
or any tier 1 scaling, but yeah.
Does he disagree with all tier 1 scaling?
No, he thinks DMC is just 4D, and it's like, how do you explain the demon world of the Kleistbach?
Okay. I would say the fruit's like a hard potential 5D, especially if you consider God of War being 5D. It's like
no potential especially not if you include God of War.
Mangler, we're trying to be nice here. Anyways, but yeah, even without that, Dante in his tier has so many hacks, abilities, and ways to amplify himself. He's unless there's a lot more tier 2 characters with more hacks, but from what I've seen, he's like top tier in tier 2. So
as far as tier, I'm assuming he was referring to this in verse. If you're referring to power scaling, this is wrong because Dante doesn't beat people in the same tier because he one-shots them. This is completely incorrect with how Dante actually wins his versus matchups. His versus matchups come from the fact that, like when we start a discussion about versus, like Dante in a versus matchup, it is now, can you kill Dante? No, die. Like that's the entire discussion. Like if you're not able to beat him and you can't resist all of his hacks and can bypass all of his resistances, you die. Right. It isn't he one shots you like a Dragon Ball character. That's not how his win cons are achieved.
I addressed the point that in DMC5 Dante needs Sparta to be strong on Urizen, but I guess you haven't read it. Alright. In the game file, it stated multiple times that Dante reached DT in that form was stronger than Urizen because he absorbed both the Rebellion and the Sparta, and with the Rebellion's ability, he fused them and reached a new level. Okay, so just to be clear, absorbing was not done by Dante. That was Rebellion's power. Rebellion doesn't fuse them together. They just became together by... There's not multiple actions happening. They just come together into one and merge into Dante. There's not multiple actions.
Also, saying the form was stronger than Urizen is a little bit disingenuous, because while it does beat him, I don't know why. I don't know if this is actually included in the. Oh wait, no, it's there for some reason. It was like the end of the video was like clocked out in some white light. So I put at the end of the video. There's literally a panel that he is fighting Final Urizen in Sin Devil Trigger. And I didn't have the panel for this, but in the 3.5, in DMC5's art book, it confirms in the final battle in Mission 17, he is flying in Sin Devil Trigger form. So that is the intended interpretation, is that he is fighting him in his strongest form. So arguing he was stronger than Urizen is a little bit silly, especially when he was like exhausted after the battle.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're literally fighting exhausted in the end of mission 18. It's 18, right? Or is it 17?
17.
Yeah, so they're both tired at that point. Dante's breathing heavily, and he's able to stab him with his base form with his sword. So that means the fight has taken a toll on Urizen as well, because Urizen, thanks to Visions of E, was able to fight Sin DT. The fact that base Dante can even close the gap on him and stab him is already confirmation that they've already been taxed to their limit.
It's also kind of a little silly to say that when Virgil immediately comes back and says, defeating you like this has no meaning. Yes. Heal your wounds and get strong. After that, we'll settle the matter.
That's also part of the reason why you could argue Virgil's technically stronger than Dante, since he gets human blood after basically being on par, if not on par with Dante, but whatever.
Look, we'll get to that later.
Another day. It wasn't just because he absorbed the Sparta, as I said in the video, simply going off the Griffin one line. Okay, I think he's misunderstanding what you use Griffin for.
Yeah, I think he's saying ignoring the game files. Like, the game files were not valuable for this, and asserting that that's what the devs are stating. So the devs aren't stating Griffin's statements? Are the devs not talking about V statements?
Okay,
because V's and Griffin's statements are actually talking about power, whereas none of your game statements are referring to power. They're referring to a transformation.
Okay, I would just say, well, I can't speak for this person, but I feel like they'd probably say that to the author there. But even in regards to that, Griffin's statement is... I don't understand why he keeps bringing up Griffin's statement as if it was used as hard evidence. Griffin's whole statement was to say that people who say Dante surpassed Sparta don't have a valid basis to work with, or probably never met. Griffin's literally the best guy who you can say met Sparta, since he fought with Mundus for years.
Oh, wait. When you said Griffin absorbing Sparta, I was referring to Griffin absorbing the Sparta. I was just doing that to explain it. I'm not talking about Griffin's statement in DMC 1. I'm talking about the one in 5. So Griffin's statement in DMC 1 is referring to pre-rebellion Sparta. That's not Sparta that fought Mundus. That's Sparta before he got the humanity boost. So this has no value at all.
This might be me misinterpreting, because he might be referring to DMC 5 Griffin.
It doesn't matter which one. Both of them would be wrong, because Griffin's just explaining what's happening to the Sparta, and DMC1 Griffin is explaining he's only comparable to that Sparta prior to the rebellion.
Second, again, when you read the scan shown in the vid, Dante needed 100% only when the Savior was amped by both Nero and the Sparta, and without Nero, Dante was solidly damaging it, even if it was taking a while. So Mingler already explained that she was trying to destroy it, although to be fair, yeah, he did need 100% of his power to block the strike, but... whether or not that's because Dreadnought's invulnerable is,
it's directly stated it's invulnerable in every single guide. So, also, solidly damaging it. We have a different definition of what qualifies as solidly damaging something.
Well, so I was going to say, I mean, if I break your fucking bones with one punch, even if it takes all my power, that would still be a decent amount of damage. Granted, he only breaks, the bottom of your foot.
So this would be like saying that if the intention of you is to kill me or to destroy or obliterate my body when you landed a punch on me that was amplified by massive steroids, and when you landed a punch on me, all it did was destroy the skin on the top part of my foot.
Hang on. Even if it was taking a while, he was still not getting really pressed nor needed DT, unlike how he did with the Savior, had Nero, and the novel went out its way to tell you he went DT and put 100% only then. That's more to explain what fucking Dreadnought actually is, but fair enough. I'm not saying Dante's one shot and pointing out misinformation, ignoring stuff to try and scale the Sparta above than what it actually is. Okay. Okay.
No.
Even then, what about the DMC 5 statements of Sparta still being super powerful and shit? Going off the guide statement that Dante might have enough power to pass Sparta would still elevate Sparta to Sin DT levels, regardless.
Also, ignoring stuff to try and scale the Sparta above what it is. What about you ignoring all of these statements? What about you ignoring all of the information within the narrative that indicates the Sparta sword needs to be given to Nero to beat Urizen?
Okay.
What about you ignoring a blatant statement in Sparta's description that confirms it has more power than Rebellion?
Hang on, let me see this. That doesn't help the case. If anything, that supports Dante probably surpassing that peak Sparta before he split his power, because when he fought Mundus in DMC1, Mundus did not say Dante was weaker than Sparta. If anything, Dante beat his ass, same as his dad, and the only reason he struggled before the island blew up was because he left the Sparta with Trish. Again, Sparta discussion's a little weird, but regardless...
It's not a little weird. We know which Sparta's being used here.
Hang on. If, say... Well, no, because you have to retroact. So I think I mentioned this to you. You have to retroactively put DMC5 Sparta's power into the other games. You can't just say in 2001.
You can just argue he beat him in a couple attacks. Actually, no, that's directly supported by 3's manga, because Arkham literally says in his rage he tore the Demon King asunder. It is not described as a fight where they're having a back and forth. He whoops his ass.
Well, even then, like, Dante loses the DT relatively quickly into the fight. Like, after, we don't know how long the actual initial fight starts, but he loses it pretty quickly.
All we know about the Sparta in this case is that it was pre-programmed to kill Mundus. We don't know how much power it was given to kill Mundus. It might have been given just enough to kill Mundus and nothing more.
It's a feat for Dante, if anything, because he beat Mundus with the Sparta, only as opposed to Sparta having his full power to beat and seal him. Again, Sparta willingly just didn't want to kill people. It doesn't make sense, especially if you believe, like, DMC 5 statements of Sparta scaling the Sin DT. It makes no fucking sense that Mundus survived any battle, unless we assume Prime Mundus is vastly stronger than the characters in the story. But then that makes shit just really fucking weird.
Also, this kind of ignores like all the feats that I mentioned involving Argosex as well. Did he forget the fact that that Sparta literally sealed 100% of his power away, and then still sealed a stronger Argosex, the Chaos? Like, that Argosex was sitting in the demon world for 1,700 years, absorbing demons.
If assume that fucking Argosaxon is prime is weaker than Argosaxon too.
Yeah, no, like, well, actually, no, that's completely fine. Like, Argosax in his prime isn't absorbing the entire demon world and conquering demons. He'd be getting stronger by the events of 2. That's literally the point of 2.
Either way, Void Mundus would still be stronger than Prime Mundus, or should be, since, you know, it's Mundus.
Void would be stronger than Prime Mundus, and Argosax during the events of 2 would be stronger than Prime Mundus, and Sparta beats Argosax with most of his power sealed away. So arguing that that Dante beat Mundus with Sparta is like a feat for them. It's like
I feel like Dante Sparta's like maybe not fully understanding what the discussion is. Okay, the point you have made is still relevant to what I'm saying, because he was doing solid damage, didn't have the possibility to take a punch from him and literally one-shot him at any time with DT Dante. Again, so this guy's still talking about he's not one-shotting Demon Kings, but so Demon Kings is we kind of mentioned this already. It's kind of a term that gets more and more complicated the more you go into it, because technically what we refer to as Demon Kings don't scale to each other. Argosax will be stronger than Mundus in DMC1.
So
Urizen will be way stronger than the other Demon Kings. You know, kind of a weird situation.
So they scale to each other in the sense that like the Demon Kings during the 2,000-year time skip scale in roughly in the same tier, near comparable levels of power. The problem is that the main timeline takes place 2,000 years after that, where some of them have gotten stronger or some of them have gotten weaker.
All right.
So, yeah.
Nobody in the comments saying anything about Dante One Shine, but that is general consensus for average DMC fans again. You know what? You could also argue this is the consensus from some DMC power scalers as well on the internet. It wasn't until recently.
Actually.
Who cares? He still needed part of Sparta's sword and not just unlock his own thing with Rebellion instead. It's like in the vid, the Sparta sword was still the biggest part that gave him power. I'm not saying that you don't have a point in addressing what's actually happening in the fight, but my point, which I'm not accusing you to make, of which Dante Smith's one-shot demon still stands, I don't understand why he brought this up at all. I mean, well,
why does he keep bringing this up? This isn't the point of the video, so why would you even bring this up?
Both mine, your point's right. Dude, I understand that part. I understand that the point of the video is that Dante isn't exactly inflict Demon King's way. What?
No, that was the point.
Okay, Mangler. So apparently the point of your video is that Dante doesn't flick away Demon Kings.
Guys, is the name of the video is that misconceptions regarding Dante's scaling? No, it's the power of Sparta at DMC reference video.
Honestly,
it's to explain misconceptions regarding Sparta scaling.
If we were going to discuss the Demon Kings, it would just be called like the power of Demon Kings or something. I love how the point of your video has gone away, Mangler.
Because it's, again, this literally proves my point about people don't understand that they're using Dante as the scaling reference when Sparta is the scaling reference.
My problem was some of the ways some of the arguments were constructed. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear, but I thought I did. Okay, so just to be clear, thank you for the comment. In case you watched this and you made it this far, thank you for the comment. Like, giving your feedback is fine. Your opinions are fine. Normally Mangler would just respond to it in text. The reason I'm doing a video behind it is because I thought there was something else going on with all. I did not read any of these comments beforehand, so I did not realize how far these responses devolved.
It's also the last time I tried to respond to someone in a reference video. They, I don't think they had like the same like grammatical setup in a lot of their sentences, and I wasn't able to like copy paste it effectively in YouTube. It was very, very difficult to type out like that response because it just took so long.
Or word it better. While there's still some good truth to things you said, it shouldn't be true to put. I brought some evidence to show. I started to the point of DMC4 is that Nero's supposed to be a student, Dante the master, not the spoiled little brat who can't power the savior with the potential to make it difficult for Dante to defeat. This ruins the story, in my opinion. Okay, so I think this just. Hang on. What is this actually?
This is also a little bit wrong because it's established in basically every single interview prior to DMC4 that Nero is not only intended to be the new protagonist, he's intended to be Dante's successor. So
even if you take the master and student approach, a lot of the times the student's supposed to have more potential than the master in these stories because that's the whole point of like training a student. You want the student to surpass the master.
Also, direct statements, direct evidence. Like, this kid might be stronger than me, destroys an enemy that I spent like 20 minutes trying to barely chip off the outer layer of. I'm going to be honest, like, arguing the thematic, like, student the master doesn't really work when you have, like, direct statements and evidence that debunks that assertion.
Alright, so I'm just going to read through these real quickly, see if this just continues devolving into discussion as to what the theme is, or like what they thought it was. Because honestly, if it's not directly response to the video, we don't have to continue further. Okay, so wait. Okay, so Nugboy supports the stance that the swords were split into thirds.
Okay.
So,
but like.
So no. So then he should have no problem believing that a third of Sparta's. So Dante would just be greater than a third of Sparta's power in 4 by his own logic.
Wait. Then how does he reconcile the Sparta having more power than Rebellion, even though Rebellion got stronger over time?
Okay. Wait. So the stance he seems to go by is that each sword is 1/3 of Sparta's power, if evenly distributed among 33%. Let's say that's his stance.
Sure.
So, okay, if that's your position, number one, Dante wouldn't be stronger than Sparta by the events of DMC4. If you guys are believing the sword Sparta only has 1/3 of its power, why would you assume
he'd be stronger by DMC3? He'd be stronger by DMC3. Because, like, the Sparta's not getting stronger. It doesn't have its original owner is dead. It's literally sealed in the demon world for 2,000 years.
I'm sorry. If you believe the swords are split directly into thirds, then you have no reason to assume Dante's stronger than Sparta in DMC4. He's literally fighting 1/3 of Sparta's power, and even then you can argue he's not even fighting the full third. If you believe he gets 2/3 of Sparta's power, which I believe I talked about in my How Powerful Dante for DMC5, I believe I did, wasn't there that assumption, although I think someone in that comment section pointed out that it might be weird to believe it's 30, like 33-3, whatever split. Then by your logic, then Dante with 2/3 of the power of Sparta can't beat Urizen before he even technically absorbs Yamato into himself. So I'm not really quite sure how. I mean, regardless, Dante would not be stronger than Sparta by the events of DMC4 if you believe it's split into thirds. Also, this kind of
You said absorb Yamato.
Well, because Urizen technically does absorb Yamato into himself, but he doesn't. It's never confirmed he absorbed Yamato the way Nero did, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, he just uses it to make barriers and whatnot. He doesn't merge it with his being.
Like, he puts the sword into himself, but it's never confirmed that he absorbed the sword the way like Nero absorbs demonic power.
I was just gonna say that like. This puts so many holes in the scaling chain now, or even just in scaling DMC in general, because then you have to reconcile how the fuck is he having trouble with Sparta Arkham in DMC3? How is he having trouble with Mundus, and why does he need the Sparta sword if his own inherent power is like greater than the Sparta sword at that point? Like, why is he having trouble with Chen when Chen literally created a replica of the Sparta sword and he has Rebellion? He should be able to crush Chen.
I'm just going to say, if you subscribe to them being split up into neat thirds, then there's no reason DMC4 Dante should be stronger than Sparta. Especially since, again, 2/3 of Sparta's power is enough to let him fight Urizen, who one-shot DMC4 Dante.
Yeah, so like, either you believe they're equal and they didn't get stronger, in which case Zim's stance is correct. If you think the Rebellion Yamato got stronger because, again, their hosts actually grow when they're alive, whereas Sparta's not, then that completely causes a massive contradiction with every single game in which Dante has to go and use different swords other than Rebellion to win the fights, or he is using Rebellion against Sparta and is consistently unable to secure a victory.
I was just going to say, like, because so keep in mind, again, you believe it's a third, and you believe that thirds will let Dante beat Mundus. Dante's already reached that level of power on his own by the events of the anime, and is already technically greater than that power by the events of DMC2's novel before he struggles with Chen. And the Sword Sparda, after all these, and that's not even including the other games and other novels that occur, the Sword Sparda still stated to be stronger than Rebellion, which is the physical manifestation of Dante's power. So it would still be stronger than a DMC5 Dante before getting, Sin DT. Which wouldn't make sense if we believe that the Sword Sparda, because the Sword Sparda... Mundus could fight Dante Sparda. Or, Sparta Dante. Like, he could knock him down. He could stab him. Like, he was comparable. So by that logic, then the Sword Sparda should have been completely worthless after fucking DMC fucking, 2, yeah. Just, after 2 would have already been useless.
No, it should have been worthless after 3's manga. Because Dante unseals it after the events of DMC1's novel. So it's, once he unlocks its demonic power in 3, it only has room to go up. Whereas the Sparta Sword's not being used by anybody. We don't even see the Sparta Sword officially until DMC1. So it should be weaker than Dante's raw demonic power in the events of 1, which fucks with the entire plot.
If you go with the thirds idea, then yeah, there's no reason to assume that, especially given what the thirds actually do. Rebellion is getting stronger, so by default, unless Mundus is Mundus wouldn't be way stronger, because Abigail, worst case scenario, Abigail still scales with DMC1 Mundus. If you believe DMC1 Mundus is fully revived, Abigail scales. If not, Abigail would be stronger, depending on how you want to take the revival statements.
Yeah.
So, worst case scenario, Dante's one-shotting, or not one-shotting, in DT, in base he can compare, in DT he can overpower a Demon King that would be on par with a third of Sparta's power, by this logic.
So, do you want to respond to Dante Sparta's comment where he's talking about a fourth of demon, or skip down to his next one? Because these are just talking about thematic stuff. I think the only next one here is...
I was going to say, I don't really think this matters for the response. This is more just them having discussion on how they would see DMC4 and situations there. Nero, worst case scenario is 1/4 demon. Best case scenario, he's still half demon if we assume Nero's mom is demon, but that seems unlikely. So... Well, I think that's this demonic material.
This comment's a little weird.
Why?
This comment that he makes down here is a little weird. So he says, so basically what they wanted to say is Nero has such huge potential that in the future with more experience will eventually surpass Dante and Sparta. And they translated that Agnes part wrongly. In which case I am actually 100% okay with, we all know Nero is destined to surpass them both in power and a person. So why would Agnes's statements, or why would the Agnes statements that Agnes made and the statements that Dante made, why would they both be wrong? Because Nero demonstrates with feats he's actually able to fatigue Dante in his battle with him in Mission 10. Dante says something to the effect of I haven't tried this hard in a really long time, and Nero's just yeah, but I was trying to kill you, but you weren't. I'm well, kid, it's just a matter of experience. It actually explains that he's breathing hard and explains why Dante is breathing hard in the game. So the Agnes statement about Nero having more demonic power in terms of Dante, but he just didn't know how to use it, that's not translated wrong. That's proven in feats. The context, it just isn't provided in the game because DMC4 is an incomplete project that didn't receive proper dev time. So... Can't really argue a mistranslation.
To be done in 6 months.
Yes, Dante wanted to teach Nero in 4, but that's because he himself had experiences from the early experiences. That's why he was able to teach Nero in the first place, and therefore shall not already surpass him in terms of power and experience. The only thing that he didn't surpass him in terms of, aside from experience and IQ, was abilities. Dante verbatim says he might be stronger than you. You just have to ignore blatant statements. You have no arguments.
Right.
There is no arguments.
All right. Since, again, I think we briefly covered that in the video, but Just for the record, the video's whole point was not that Dante can't one-shot Demon Kings. It was specifically to talk about where Sparta's power reference or like scales in reference.
It was not about Dante one-shotting Demon Kings. It was not about Nero scaling or the what's it called? The Savior scaling. It was just to explain how powerful Sparta is and the misconceptions involving Sparta.
All right.
If you didn't get that by reading the video or the explanation that I provided in the video, you messed up.
I will just say I was a little surprised on that, but yeah, no. So we're not going to respond to the other comments. At that point, it's just them having a discussion with themselves and not really responding to anything from the video. Most of the other comments didn't talk about the video, so that's fine. So yeah, that's about it. So I guess do you have anything else you want to say, Mingler, or are you good?
I just would say that if you're going to make arguments against the information I presented in the video, please read Deadly Fortune and actually look at the scans that I provided, because every single person that's talking about the Savior in the Sparta explains verbatim how it works in direct, blatant, obvious statements. So the more obvious it is, the harder it is for you to lie about it or run away from it. I'm not saying that you are. I'm saying the more obvious something is, it becomes more obvious to someone who is using these statements to figure out if you are lying. Because if it's a blatant statement and you're just... What?
Your humility is inspiring.
Look, like if I have a blatant statement that says this character is stronger than them and I have no contradictions to it and surrounding evidence, and you just say that doesn't mean what it says. What? I'm sorry, what? You're just lying.
All right.
Or if you're not, like, you're really, really, really crossing that line.
All right. Well, that's more or less it for this video. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for your time as always. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys on the next stream or video. Take care, everybody.